This video is brought to you by NordVPN. To find out more about their service, get a great deal and support the channel, head over to tldrnews.co.uk/NordVPN. There's a link in the description. Huawei is a company you might not have heard of until recently, when they suddenly began filling the headlines. Huawei is facing the risk of being forced out of various countries' 5G infrastructure, due to fears that Huawei's equipment can or will be used by the Chinese government to spy on other countries. Huawei is also accused of a long-running process of financial fraud and even intellectual property theft. On top of that, Huawei is also accused of breaking US sanctions in Iran. So there's clearly a lot going on here. There's a number of reasons why Huawei is suddenly in the public eye. But let's roll it back a moment and explain exactly what is being debated. As I mentioned earlier, Huawei is being forced out of the 5G infrastructure in some countries. So let's break that down. 5G, or 5th generation, is the next generation of mobile internet connectivity. In the coming months and years, we'll begin to see 5G replace 4G, just as 4G began to replace 3G in 2010, and 3G began to replace 2G in 2003. Without getting too technical, 5G is all about increasing the efficiency of the radio spectrum and allowing more devices to access mobile internet at the same time. If you think of it as traffic, 4G is a dual carriageway, 5G is a motorway. First generation connections only allowed voice, second added texting and messages, third was characterised by the addition of video, fourth allowed mobile gaming and streaming, and now we're at the 5th generation. Marketing 5G could be a little more difficult, as it's unlikely to be defined by any specific new technology. Users will be able to do everything they can do now, but they'll be able to do it much better and faster. Mobile users should notice less delay or latency when pressing a button and seeing the effect on screen. Mobile video should be near instantaneous and glitch-free. Video calls should become clearer and less jerky. Wearable fitness devices could monitor your health in real time, alerting doctors as soon as any emergency rises. That's because 5G can offer mobile internet speeds which are 10 to 20 times faster. Some companies claim up to 50 times faster. Although there might not be the same obvious jump in tech that's existed in the past, this is still an exciting technology. These speeds pave the way for more complex technologies. They allow us to do some truly exciting things. Stuff like multiple autonomous vehicles being able to interact with each other, like swarms of drones working together, or driverless cars coordinating to prevent accidents or delays. A few countries are hoping to have 5G running before 2020. Qatar claims that it already has 5G services, and there's a lot of controversy in the US about companies claiming 5G coverage. But most countries are expecting to see 5G launch in the 2020s. Okay, so surely that's enough background, yeah? Well, close your 5G background folder and open your Huawei background folder. No one said this topic was simple. Huawei is a Chinese telecommunications and electronics company, founded in 1979. While you might not have heard of them before, they do a lot of things, from building telecommunications networks to making phones and delivering cloud services. As you might have gleaned, they have a big stake in 5G, with the company claiming they have more than 30 commercial 5G contracts across the globe. That's a big number, and they're certainly not a small company. In the second quarter of 2018, Huawei shipped more phones than Apple, to become the second biggest smartphone manufacturer in the world, with Samsung leading the way. These huge sales help fund the company's financial success, with 2017 revenues of £67.7 billion and profits of £5.3 billion. Officially, Huawei is a company owned by its stakeholders, but the company's founder and CEO, Ren Zhengfei, is relatively unknown. He broke years of public silence to combat their recent crisis in Canada. Their CEO is a member of the Chinese Communist Party and was an engineer in the People's Liberation Army. So you can probably start to see how things unravel and the crisis begins. Although there's a long history of suspicion against Huawei, the contemporary crisis only really took off in 2018. If you want to learn about the more than 15 years of suspicion and controversy, we have a full timeline of events, and that's available at tldrnews.co.uk/Huawei. And of course there's a link to that in the description. We don't have time to cover all of that here, so instead in this video, let's start the timeline in January 2018. It's then that Huawei failed to secure contracts with AT&T and Verizon Communications. Therefore, they weren't able to sell their phones through those carriers. 90% of phones are sold through a carrier in the US, so that really limited Huawei's potential. In February 2018, at the US Senate intelligence hearing, 6 heads of the US intelligence organizations warned Americans not to use Huawei due to suspicion of spying. In May 2018, the US Department of Defense warns of Huawei being a security risk and stop selling their phones on military bases. In August 2018, the US bans Huawei phones from government departments and government contractors, and also Australia and New Zealand ban Huawei from their 5G networks. So the US has been making some fairly major accusations about Huawei and banning its use in a number of areas. But what's the basis of these concerns? Well, for a while now, a number of countries have become worried that Huawei's equipment could be used by the Chinese government for purposes such as surveillance. That's because the Chinese government requires any Chinese business to comply with the government for national security needs. So the worry is that the Chinese government could force Huawei to build a backdoor in its networks to allow for spying and espionage. Fergus Fanson from the Australian Strategic Institute says that the biggest concern is whether they want to do it or not. They can be compelled by the Chinese Communist Party to spy and conduct espionage on the Chinese Communist Party's behalf. So the concern is that if a country allowed Huawei to build 5G networks, they might be allowing the Chinese government to spy on their telecommunications, which are used by everything and everyone in the modern world. As we've discussed, the main countries involved in this controversy are China and the US, but there are many other countries who are deeply involved too. As I mentioned, Australia and New Zealand have banned Huawei equipment from their 5G network. Japan has effectively done the same. Many EU countries are set to do the same. And Britain has recently published a report into how safe Huawei equipment is. We'll discuss this later in the video, but even before its publication, British Telecom was already removing Huawei equipment from its cores, to be completed by 2021. That being said though, the US has always been the main advocate for banning Huawei equipment across the globe, especially within the Five Eyes alliance, made up of the US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. The US's issues with Huawei go beyond spying. They accuse the company of financial fraud and IP theft. We explain it more in our full timeline, but the US requested the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the daughter of Huawei's CEO, and was widely anticipated to be his heir. They accuse that she used the company Skycom to avoid US sanctions in Iran. The intellectual property issue began when Cisco sued Huawei for stealing their source code. The lawsuit was eventually dropped as Huawei agreed to Cisco's demands, including discontinuing certain disputed products. Some argue that Huawei isn't a security threat, and this is all a US attempt to maintain its technological and innovative lead over China. The core arguments for this are 1. Spyware in operating systems is relatively easy to detect. So if it was in Huawei phones, then surely US experts would have found it. 2. Why isn't Motorola subject to these warnings? Motorola was acquired by Chinese company Lenovo back in October 2014. Although it's now owned by a Chinese company, it's still a big, well-known US company. So does this explain why the US isn't targeting Motorola? 3. People used to say that because Huawei is subject to little international pressure, this suggested that it was purely the US creating issues, though recent developments go some way to invalidate this claim. If allegations were correct, and this was a protectionist move from the US, it would make some sense. 5G has long been a target for China. 2 and 3G were dominated by European countries, 4G was led by the US, and 5G, well, that's still up for grabs. If China does dominate 5G, they could reap huge economic benefits. Companies and industries may move away from Western tech and begin to focus on China, which really shores up China as a growing superpower. Also, attempting to protect US companies fits with Trump's America First protectionist policy. As a UK news network, we always like to look at how the news impacts the UK. As we said, the US has been pressuring allies to remove Huawei equipment, threatening countries that it could reduce security sharing if Huawei is used. So if Britain uses Huawei, their relationship with the US could be strained. On the whole though, Huawei is not used at the cores of British networks. For example, British Telecom uses no Huawei equipment in its cores, though EE does, and BT did acquire them back in 2016. Network companies have complained that 5G implementation will be seriously slowed if there's a ban on Huawei equipment. That's because their equipment is incredibly widely used. Not only would it have to be removed and replaced, but alternatives would have to be found and built into the network. The UK government recently published a report which explains their thinking on the Huawei scandal. The report concluded that there are long-term and serious security risks for the UK if we continue to use Huawei equipment. They can only provide limited assurance that all risks to UK national security from Huawei's involvement in the UK's critical networks can be sufficiently mitigated long-term. However, the UK does comment that there's little evidence yet to claim that this risk is due to deliberate espionage. Rather, the poor practices of the company have led to security risks, referring to significant technical issues with Huawei's engineering processes. The report is pretty bad for Huawei in the UK. Before the report, some UK authorities thought the risks of using Huawei could be managed, but this strongly disputes that, saying there's only limited reassurance that these risks can be managed. What are the consequences going forward then? Will the UK follow the path of many other nations and ban the use of Huawei equipment? Well, we don't know yet. This report basically recommends that it shouldn't be used until Huawei have sorted out their systems and a solution is found. The full answer to this question will come in another report, being produced by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. Huawei responded, saying that they're taking the issue very seriously and will invest $2 billion to address the issues. However, it could take between 3 and 5 years to fix the issues, which, with their reputation deteriorating fast, could be too late. This video was brought to you by NordVPN. If you're concerned about the privacy of your data or data security issues like the ones we discussed in this video, a VPN could give you some serious peace of mind. VPNs like the ones offered by NordVPN keep your data safe by connecting you to your content remotely. This means that if anyone were to look in, they wouldn't be able to see your IP address or any of your private information. Service from VPN works across 6 different devices, including Macs, PCs, Android and iOS. Their network also has over 5,100 servers in 62 countries. At the time of recording, they're offering a plan for as low as £2.29 a month. And even regardless of this special offer, the price of this multi-award-winning VPN comes in at just a few pounds a month. If you're interested in protecting yourself online, and you really should be, then you can find out more at tldrnews.co.uk/NordVPN. Using that link supports the channel and helps us grow our content offering. We've released 10 videos in the past week, and having the support of sponsors like NordVPN make that possible. Again, head over to tldrnews.co.uk/NordVPN for more information.